If you think these modern vehicles with their experimental features aren't safe, then prepare to have your mind blown with these outdated features from vintage cars that would make you think twice before stepping in one of these death traps. Number 20, neck seatbelts. You're going to laugh hysterically once you know one of the selling points of this design in the 60s, that it cuts off the blood to your head so you pass out and stay loose instead of tensing up in anticipation of a crash. What a brilliant idea! Another good thing is the one involved in an accident will get hurt permanently, and we will resolve the overpopulation rather quickly. And you don't have to worry about your car insurance premiums going up. What a win-win! These ingenious contraptions were designed to keep you secure in the most awkward way possible. Instead of comfortable lap and shoulder belt, you got a belt that seemed to say, "Let's see how many ways we can make your neck ache." We once had a state police officer describe how someone had their head cut off by a seat belt, and they had to pick it up a couple 100 feet away from the accident. Always wondered how it could have happened. We don't wonder anymore. People also called this neck seat belt a chiropractor whenever the car hit a pothole. You'd hear two snaps, one from the wheel and the other from your neck. We have no idea why it took Chrysler decades to stop prosecution for this thing and stop using it in their cars. Number 19, wedge-shaped headrest. Don't underestimate the importance of headrest. Contrary to popular belief, they aren't just for show. Headrests are crucial safety features designed to protect your neck from whiplash in a collision. If your wife is 5 feet tall, then yeah, her headrest is 100% decorative. Her problems don't end there. Does the seatbelt choke her too? Being 5 feet in a world of giants suck. Only dare to suggest a booster seat to solve the problem if you're ready to eat Brussels sprouts for dinner, you heathen. We were baffled by the shape of the headrest in the 60s and 70s cars because they were so uncomfortable. Instead of supporting the back of your neck like a neck pillow, they're wedge-shaped, with the point of the wedge resting kinda on top of your head. That was until we saw some footage of crash dummies and realized that the wedge shape means that, in the case of an impact where you're driven back into your seat, it creates a perfect cushion to force your head down and tuck your chin into your sternum, protecting your neck. The problem comes when there is material on the back of your neck, like a gaming chair cushion. An impact would drive you backwards and force your head back and your chin up, basically cracking your neck backwards. Number 18, Ford Pintos Death Trap. Neck belts isn't the only thing car companies got grilled on. Many observers might recall the controversy surrounding the 1976 Ford Pinto, the economy model compact, which when rear-ended ignited its fuel tanks and became doused in flaming gasoline, causing passengers to ineffectively pound on the windows and scream at superheated temperatures within before exploding as a bomb does. The Ford Pinto is infamous for its defective fuel system, which posed a serious fire hazard in rear-end collisions. Rather than implementing a relatively inexpensive safety fix for $11 per car, Ford opted to pay settlements for wrongful death claims, prioritizing financial gain over consumer safety. There were civil cases, and it was rightly concluded that the Pinto wasn't any more dangerous than any other car on the road at the time. Ford was the victim of public opinion after a report hit the news. Pretty much every car on the road at the time had severely exposed gas tanks and were rolling coffins for the passengers. Little to useless seatbelts and no crumble zones. The Pinto's demise was necessary to get the laws and the industry moved in the right direction to focus on safety. But this was not the reason Pinto failed in Brazil. I'm sure Chrysler hired translators after they knew the reason, that nobody wanted to buy the Ford Pinto during its launch in Brazil in the 1970s. The company then realized that Pinto is actually Portuguese slang for small male genitalia. Number 17, Volkswagen Beetle front fuel tanks. The Volkswagen or Wagen Beetles are a fan favorite. These classic cars have been around for decades now and are loved by many. But even if love is blind, it's not completely stupid, which is why we need to call out one of the worst design choices in Volkswagen Beetles. The rear engine meant that the fuel tank was right in front of the driver, which didn't make for much of a crumble zone. In the event of a front-end collision, the fuel tank's location makes it vulnerable to damage. Since the tank is situated directly in front of the vehicle, any impact could potentially rupture the tank or cause fuel to leak. This increases the risk of fire or explosion following a crash. The Beetle's front tank didn't come with fancy safety features. No reinforced walls, no crash barriers, just a big metal box of oops, I hope that doesn't explode. Modern cars are designed with crumble zones and reinforced structures to absorb impact energy and protect the occupants. The Beetle's front-mounted tank lacks such advanced safety features, making it more prone to severe consequences in a crash. Number 16. Hood ornaments. Remember hood ornaments on cars? Those shiny, cool-looking things that every kid wanted to rip off the hood and take home as a toy have lost their charm over the years, but they still remain as a relic of a time when style and cars went together. They were just for decoration, but it was found that most decorations on cars were deadly missiles, waiting to be launched by an accident. Most car brands have had to remove their hood ornaments due to increasingly strict pedestrian collision regulations. Jaguar really didn't pull any punches with its famous leaper, that springing silver cat aimed straight at one of your internal organs as you attempt to make it safely through the crosswalk. Bonus points to Jaguar for not only streamlining the shape of its chrome spirit animal for maximum penetration, but also for giving it actual teeth that will no doubt cause the coroner to sigh deeply as they write up the accident report. As pedestrian safety became a much higher priority, hood ornaments were abandoned by car manufacturers in order to avoid being the target of victims, but that wasn't the only reason. Another main reason was simply because people kept breaking them off and stealing them as trophies. Talk about hiding the weapon of murder. Number 15. Automatic seatbelts. The amount of complaints we've heard about this feature makes us feel glad it's still not around. At a time when seatbelt usage was staggeringly low, people thought that automatic seatbelts were part of the ultimate solution for reduced traffic deaths. The concept was sound. Never forget to put on your seatbelt again. But only if it was as easy as they made it sound. Getting into a car with one was awkward, as you had to slide under the seatbelt to sit down in the seat. They were also more dangerous because after they slowly tried to decapitate you while getting in, many people just called it good and did not manually add the lap belt part, which, it was later discovered, was actually more dangerous than not wearing a harness at all in certain instances. Opening the car door, the seatbelt would knock off glasses for those who wore them. It felt like those auto seatbelts had a thing against short people because adjusting these uncomfortable seatbelts was a nightmare for short people and would usually end up choking them. These automatic guillotines in cars saw a decline in use as more and more cars started getting airbags installed in them because of legislation. Decline in use as more and more cars started getting airbags installed in them because of legislation. Number 14. Suicide doors. There has never been a more scary name for a car feature than suicide doors. Most of us get in the car one way. We lift or squeeze the door handle, and the hinges near the front tire allow the door to open. But why open doors the boring way when you can put those hinges anywhere? This was the fad in the United States for putting the hinges of the rear doors near the rear tires, so the doors opened backward. These backward opening doors were called suicide doors. Those things could kill you in a number of different ways. If the door didn't close correctly, aerodynamic force might drag it open while you're driving, and people would lean out of the car to close it without seat belts. Sometimes they fell out into traffic. Or you could stop your car and be halfway out the door while someone coming up from behind hit the door, which then crushed you into the door frame. Suicide doors were design features of mid-century Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury cars. These rear hinge doors had the advantage of making it easier for the passenger to enter and exit the vehicle while also making it look like you were a royal figure entering the scene. Number 13. Metal dashboards. A car interior from the early 20th century was nothing short of a death trap. With metal dashboards and all sorts of controls and levers pointing toward the passengers and drivers, it was a miracle people actually survived the drives. In the early days of automobile manufacturing, dashboards were made from metal for their durability and aesthetic appeal. Instead of a nice soft surface, you'd got a dashboard that could double as a medieval torture device. They were often adorned with stylish elements such as chrome accents, knobs, and gadgets. As more and more cars came onto the roads, car collisions became more common. Occupants collided with the metal dashes, knobs, and handles, causing major injuries. It's like having a metal wall as your co-pilot. The only thing softer would be a brick wall. Furness detailed the aftermath of crashes in his article that took the public by storm. The article was so popular that judges were sentencing speeders to copy it out 50 times or go to jail. So is that where the practice of making students write things 100 times as punishment comes from? Metal dashboards were not just there to give you a tight hug during a collision. They also ensured that you could cook eggs on them on a hot sunny day. That's right. On any hot July morning, these metal dashboards were hot enough to burn your skin off. Number 12. No crumble zones. In the olden days, when crumble zones sounded like something out of a sci-fi novel, cars would be heavier and less prone to damage in the case of an accident. Surely that's what we all want, right? Well, if you're willing to pay with broken limbs and a hefty medical bill. For decades, it has been a false notion that old cars were safer because they were made of less plastic and were heavier. Research and tests were proven otherwise. No crumble zones were a feature where the car's answer to a crash was, just tough it out. Sure, the old cars hold up better, just not the humans inside them as much. So long as you were willing to cycle out worthless human meat sacks, you can have a car that can be crashed many times over before needing bodywork. A solid, sturdy, built like a tank, older car simply absorbs the full force of the impact, and you, as the occupant, are going to eat a lot of that force. Simply put, crumble zones in new cars absorb the impact, keeping it away from the passenger compartment. Number 11. Rumble seats. The rumble seat was the imaginative creation of 1920s and 1930s Detroit to squeeze 4 people into a 2-passenger vehicle. Essentially, a rumble seat was a seat mounted in the trunk of a 2-door coupe. The back of the seat was attached to the trunk lid, which opened from the top, not the bottom, and folded back, not up, when the trunk was open. As kids, riding in a rumble seat was often seen as an adventure and fun experience. The rumble seats would often host the Royal Rumble between kids who fought for these elevated open-air seats. The seat was designed for the thrill seekers of the past. Want to experience the joys of sitting outside while your car is moving? The rumble seats got you covered, as long as you don't mind dodging road debris and bugs. Rumble seats, while offering a unique and nostalgic charm, pose several significant dangers to passengers. Rumble seats did not have seat belts, which are crucial for keeping passengers secure during sudden stops, turns, or collisions. Another flaw of the design was that the part of the boot lid became the rear windshield. Nobody designing it seemed to notice that said windshield became a window into what valuables you were carrying to let thieves see if they should have a go at nicking what's in there. Brilliant! Number 10. Wrist twist steering wheels. There's a famous saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Ford engineers may have missed it in the 60s when they came out with a contraption that looks like it was built for accidents to happen. Apparently, some engineers thought, hey, who needs a regular steering wheel when you can have something that feels like a video game controller? Instead of a bulky wheel, wrist twist cars would have a pair of twisty dials that the driver would reach out and twist. The pair of turning dials were locked to twist in unison. Try to make sense of that. It was smaller than a wheel, which made the driver's seat a bit roomier and offered increased visibility. It also let the driver leisurely place his or her arms on armrests. Imagine slamming into those at 40 miles per hour in a crash. If you rear-end someone, instead of hitting a big flat circle, you hit two small circles that definitely look like they could punch a hole in your sternum. Double the damage, double the fun. Ultimately, the wrist twist never caught on and was never put into production. It's one of many new steering systems that have been experimented with over the years, only for the traditional steering wheel to win out in the end. Number 9. Non-collapsible steering wheels. Prior to the 60s, the steering column went straight to the front steering box and was a single rod of steel. Imagine a solid steel spear aimed at your chest in a head-on collision. Who in their right mind would want that? Non-collapsible steering wheels are made from rigid materials and are fixed in place. In a collision, they do not absorb impact energy, leading to a direct transfer of force to the driver. That is why most, if not all, modern cars have a section of the steering column that is designed to allow for an accident. It is more like an old-school telescope. You can squish it up and then pull it back to full length. No damage results. But in older cars, the lack of seat belts coupled with a non-collapsible steering wheel meant that you were going to have a pretty long stay in a hospital after an accident. In a crash, that steering wheel doesn't budge. Instead of collapsing to absorb the impact, it stands its ground. Your chest, however, does not. The dangers associated with non-collapsible steering wheels led to regulatory changes. In the 1960s, safety standards began to require the inclusion of collapsible steering columns in new vehicles to reduce the risk of injury in collisions. Number 8. Gull wing doors. We all remember the iconic DMC DeLorean from the Back to the Future movies, with its unique gull wing doors. Doors that open upwards instead of the boring old ways. Sign us up! But they're more than just some flashy design choice. Gull wing doors take away less clearance to open compared to traditional doors, making them great for tight urban spaces. They're like the peacocks of the car world, but with a few, let's say, unique challenges. They'll let you load a kid into the car without hunching over. You can even drive with them open. Did we mention they are cool? Despite all of these reasons, safety was a big issue, which led to the downfall of the gull wing doors. Safety standards meant that doors should be designed in a way that is feasible to open them after a rollover crash, and getting gull wing doors to comply was a little rough. The gull wing door design lacked any type of safety mechanism. The doors could jam during an accident, and the windows were too small to use in an emergency. If it rolled on its roof, it was game over. All of these issues could be easily avoided by a solution that, at this point, I think you can possibly guess. It was just better not to have them. Number 7. Gas tanks near the rear axle. Everyone has known for years that placing gas tanks behind the rear axle of the car increases the risk of fire and death. Yet some car manufacturers, like Chrysler, kept making Jeeps with gas tanks placed behind the rear axle, which exploded and caught fire in the case of a rear-end collision. These cars were cruising around with gas tanks perfectly positioned for disaster. It's like strapping a bomb to the back of your car and hoping for the best. One of the most infamous examples is the Ford Pinto. In the 1970s, it was revealed that the Pinto's fuel tank was located near the rear axle, leading to a high risk of fire in rear-end collisions. In a rear-end collision, that gas tank turned the Pintos into a mobile bonfire. This design flaw resulted in numerous accidents, fatalities, and eventually led to a massive recall and significant changes in automotive safety regulations. The placement of fuel tanks on passenger vehicles has changed over the past 3 decades, and for good reason. Automakers gradually have repositioned the tank to an area in front of the rear axle, generally below the rear passenger seat. Number 6. Front bench seats. The words classic American car might conjure memories of massive tail fins, big engines, and in many cases, bench seats. These seatbelt lacking benches meant only one thing: a roller coaster ride for the driver and the unlucky passengers who dared to go on a drive. The front bench seats was once standard in American cars, but over time it disappeared, in part due to changing taste and safety regulations. Without adequate lateral support, passengers were more likely to slide across the seat, increasing the risk of injury during a collision. Poor seating posture due to lack of support led to increased driver fatigue, which in turn affected driving safety. In a crash, the bench seat turned into a launch pad. You're going for a ride whether you like it or not. And trust us, the windshield is not a fun destination. Regardless of these flaws, they were a must-have feature in your car if you were planning to go to the drive-in theater for the ultimate viewing experience. Yeah, right. A push toward safer vehicles in the 1970s hurt the case for the bench seat. Automakers wanted to be able to install automatic seat belts and airbags in cars and had a hard time making them for the center seat on the bench. Number 5. Suicide knobs. These sound like the long-lost brothers of suicide doors. They used to be called spinner knobs and were sold almost everywhere, including most hardware stores, Western Auto, and variety stores. Every truck stop seemed to have new varieties of these knobs. Now you must be wondering, why were they called suicide knobs? There are a few reasons. 1. They'll sometimes grab a shirt sleeve and get snagged up right in the middle of a turn. 2. In the case of bump steer, they'll just about knock your thumb off and shove it down your throat for you. They've been known to pick the worst possible moment to break off, like right in the middle of a hard turn. None of those scenarios are very pleasant. Back in the day, these knobs were the epitome of cool. Need to make a sharp turn? Just give it a spin. Need to park with one hand while sipping your milkshake? No problem. That is, until things went south. These have been around since before shoulder belts and airbags. Problem was that getting in an accident in an old car with just a lap belt and no crumble zone, you would end up flying into the steering wheel and the knob would break your face or ribs. Number 4. Water-filled bumpers. We suspect that you've never thought, hey, wait a minute, why the hell aren't my bumpers filled with water? But John Rich in the 60s had the exact same idea in his mind, for reasons we don't know. He called them hydraulic bumpers. The name makes them sound a bit more complex than they actually are. A slightly more accurate name might be bumpers with industrial-grade water balloons attached to them. They look clunky and comical, and when an impact happens, they emit an equally comical-looking money shot of a water geyser. And all of our instincts tells us that this is a crackpot idea, worthy of amusement only. The idea was simple. Fill the bumpers with water to absorb impact in a collision. Sounds great in theory, right? But in practice, it's like using a water balloon to stop a wrecking ball. What John Rich also didn't plan for was the winter, when the weather goes below the freezing point and water turns to ice. The bumpers also look unappealing because they're essentially 2 black boxes installed on each fender, leaving no room for creativity as far as design goes. In the same vein, the bumpers added to the car's overall weight, which could hinder handling. 3. Lap belts. One feature that holds the alpha status in cars is safety. And speaking of safety, seat belts are first in command. Lap belts, once a common seatbelt design, have significant associated dangers, particularly when compared to the more modern and safer 3-point seatbelts. Safety regulations were limited during the 50s. Although two-point seatbelts had been invented by then, most cars did not have them installed. Even the cars that had two-point seatbelts could not ensure driver safety because of design limitations. The existing design only crossed through the lap and left the drivers prone to injury in the event of an accident. Lap belts were like the seatbelt's awkward cousin, who never quite got the memo on safety. It was like having a helmet made out of paper. Sure, it was something, but in terms of safety, it was your own enemy. In a collision, an occupant may slide under the lap belt, a phenomenon known as submarining. This can cause severe abdominal injuries as the belt exerts force on the soft tissues and internal organs. Over time, the limitations and dangers of lap belts became evident, leading to the development and widespread adoption of three-point seatbelts, which include both lap and shoulder straps. Today, lap belts are considered outdated and are rarely used in new vehicles. They are typically found only in older cars or specific seating positions, such as the center rear seat in some older models. Number 2, single circuit braking system. The single circuit braking system. It's as old as your grandpa's jokes and just as dangerous. Picture this: one tiny hydraulic line controlling all 4 brakes. If it fails, well, you better hope you have every sort of insurance imaginable. The use of single-circuit brake systems in older vehicles posed a significant safety hazard when compared to modern dual-circuit systems. Before the 1960s, single-circuit brake systems were the norm in vehicles, utilizing one hydraulic circuit to control all 4 wheels. However, in the event of a hydraulic line or component failure, the entire braking system became non-functional, potentially leading to severe consequences. Given the heightened vigilance required for maintaining single-circuit systems and the potential risk of contamination, modern dual-circuit systems were developed for enhanced safety and peace of mind. Modern vehicles use dual-circuit brake systems, which separate the hydraulic circuits for the front and rear brakes. Dual-circuit systems provide a fail-safe, greatly reducing the risk of total brake failure. So, next time you're admiring a vintage beauty, remember, appreciate the design, the style, the history, but maybe upgrade the brakes. Because trust us, there's nothing nostalgic about a total brake failure. And number 1, weak door latches. Back in the day, these latches were all the rage. They kept the door closed most of the time. Before the 1970s, many cars had simple latch mechanisms that weren't built to handle the forces of a collision. This was before stricter safety standards were put into place. In the event of a crash, these weak door latches could fail, leading to doors opening and significantly increasing the risk of occupants being ejected from the vehicle. Weak door latches were famous for turning a minor fender bender into an unexpected ejection seat test. It's a serious safety concern because weak door latches can compromise the integrity of the vehicle's safety cage, causing more deformation of the passenger compartment during a collision. When these latches failed, the doors flung open like they were auditioning for an action movie stunt. Only problem was, you were the unwilling stunt double. Modern door latches are designed to remain secure during collisions, using more robust materials and locking mechanisms. By the 1970s and 80s, new safety regulations required vehicles to have more robust door latches that could withstand the forces encountered in crashes. Many modern cars feature secondary locking mechanisms and reinforced door frames to further enhance safety. These were the 20 dangerous old car features that did not stand the test of time. Comment below if you think we missed something you encountered in the golden era. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.